All right, today we're diving deep into the Bible's most mysterious book, Revelation. But we're not tackling the whole thing. Nope, we're looking at just a single sentence, one verse that contains an entire cosmic drama, a celestial birth, a fearsome enemy, and a child destined to rule everything. So let's break it down.
And here it is, Revelation 12, verse 5. On the surface, it sounds almost straightforward, right? But it's so deceptive. Every single phrase here is like a doorway into a much, much bigger story. We're talking about power, conflict, destiny, the whole shebang. So, yeah, let's start unpacking it.
So, what in the world is going on here? Seriously, you've got this celestial woman, this divine kid, and this scepter made of iron. I mean, it sounds like something out of a legend, right? But it's right there in the text, presented as prophecy. To make any sense of it, we're going to need a roadmap.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get into the original words themselves. Then we'll see how it's a story about Jesus, and then how it becomes a story about the church. And finally, we'll wrap it all up and see what it means for us.
Okay, first things first, let's put on our detective hats and do a little linguistic digging. To really get what this verse is saying, we've got to go back to the original Greek. And trust me, this isn't just about a one-for-one translation. It's about feeling the weight and the nuance behind these ancient words. So let's look at that word for rule. In Greek, it's pomeno. And this is so cool because it doesn't just mean to be the boss or to command. The root of the word is actually shepherd. So when you hear rule, you should be thinking shepherd. It's this idea of ruling with care and guidance, not just brute force. It's about authority that's built on a relationship.
But then you get this next part, rogdo sidera, which means with a rod of iron. And that image, it's all about absolute, unshakable authority. There's no bending, no breaking. So you've got this really fascinating contrast, right? The gentle, caring rule of a shepherd, but carried out with the unbreakable strength of iron. It's a total paradox, gentle and absolute at the same time.
And then there's the action word caught up. The Greek is harpazo. Now get this isn't some slow, graceful floating up into the sky. No way. This word means to snatch, to seize, to rip away suddenly and forcefully. It's a powerful, decisive move, a divine intervention where the child is literally seized and brought to the throne. Okay, let's recap. We've got the rule of a shepherd, the authority of iron, and a sudden, forceful ascension. Now that we've unlocked these key terms, we can start moving from the literal words to what this is all really about, the symbolism. All right, so we've got a good handle on the words. Now it's time to look at the symbols. Because with a book like Revelation, the literal meaning is almost always just the tip of the iceberg. It's the gateway to a much deeper spiritual story.
So you can really see this verse working on two different levels. On the literal level, it's pretty straightforward. A child is born and he goes up to God's throne. Simple enough. But on the symbolic level, wow, it's so much bigger. It represents the birth of a whole new kind of humanity, a humanity that is spiritually awakened and gets to share in this incredible ultimate victory.
So the big question is, who is this man-child? And the clearest, most direct interpretation points to one person, and that's Jesus Christ. You can almost think of this verse as a super condensed biography of Jesus. It summarizes his entire life and mission in just a handful of powerful phrases.
I mean, just look at how perfectly it maps onto his life. The man-child being born, that's his birth, his incarnation. The rod of iron, well, that's his spiritual authority, which he fully established through his sacrifice on the cross, his atonement. And being caught up onto God, that is a perfect description of his resurrection and ascension into heaven. Finally, arriving at the throne, that's his exaltation, sitting at the right hand of God. The entire gospel story is basically squeezed into this one single verse. It's incredible.
So in a way, this verse is the cosmic picture of what Jesus declared on the cross. It is finished. The mission was accomplished. The child was born, he proved his authority, and he took his place on the throne. But, and this is a big but, the story doesn't actually stop there.
Yeah, the story keeps going. It expands. It widens out to include all of his people, the church. See, the victory of this man-child was never intended to be a solo act. It was always meant to be a shared victory.
The really central idea here is the classic head and body connection. What's true for Jesus as the head becomes true for the church, which is his body. So his ascension wasn't just the end of his story on earth, it was the beginning of an invitation for all believers to share in that very same victory.
You can see this amazing spiritual progression. Step 1, Jesus is caught up to the throne. He secures the win. Step 2, believers are then spiritually raised up right alongside him, united with him. And this all leads to an absolutely mind-blowing promise later in Revelation: the authority gets shared. Believers who overcome are literally granted a seat on his throne with him. His story actually becomes our story.
Okay, wow. So we've gone all the way from these ancient Greek words to this huge cosmic story about Jesus and the church. But let's bring it home. What's the big takeaway? What does this ancient verse have to do with you and me, right here, right now?
So really, we've unpacked this verse in 3 layers. First, you have the words themselves, the literal text. Then you have the symbolic layer, this incredible picture of Christ's total victory. But the third, and maybe most important layer, is the invitation. It's an invitation for believers to step into that victory, to share in that same spiritual authority.
And that brings us to the final, really challenging question. If this throne is a shared throne, if this verse is an invitation to reign in life, what does that even look like today? In your life, in my life? What does it actually mean to live from a place of victory, of spiritual authority, in the middle of our everyday routines? And that, well, that's the question this incredible verse leaves us with.